Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Mike Murtis. You're watching Gamer Logic, and today we're going to take a look at video game action figures from the 90s. Now, as someone who grew up in the 1980s, I had quite the variety of toys that I could play from. Action figures really were a tremendous thing in the 1980s. I mean, think about it. You had Transformers, G.I. Joe, Thundercats. Chances are, if there was a Saturday morning cartoon for it, there was an action figure line. Because let's face it, cartoons sell toys. As I continued to get into video games, though, and really began to love everything about my Nintendo Entertainment System, I was constantly wishing that there were toys from some of my favorite video games. Castlevania, Contra, even Mario, or Zelda. And unfortunately, in North America, we really did not have a wide selection of toys. Nintendo put out these trophies and stuff that depicted certain moments from these video games that you could kind of use as a celebration trophy for beating the game. But in all honesty, looking back at them now, I just saw them at the Midwest Gaming Classic. They are ugly as hell. Now, I know Japan actually had a great variety of action figures based on video games. Mega Man / Rockman being a big one, had a huge toy line in Japan from what I understand, even in the late 1980s. North America, not so much though. That eventually changed though in the 1990s. And anytime there was a video game action figure, you could bet that I was into it. And even into my teens, I actually collected video game action figures. And I have a whole bunch right here that I've kept, that I've collected throughout the years, and still love to this day. And I'm still always actively looking around to see where I can find these classic 1990s video game toys. And for me, the real start to that lineup actually goes with Street Fighter. Street Fighter actually had a G.I. Joe toy line. Now, these are actually Street Fighter original movie fighters. These actually I found recently, but they were based off the movie, but they still had all the classic character actions. But I think it's really funny, as close as they were to depict the actual characters, you know, they had to come with like the G.I. Joe standard. Like Sagat here has a combat knife as well as a machine gun. He's got a baseball bat with a, it looks like a brick on it. And I don't know what the hell Blanca has here. He has, looks like a broken off shovel handle. And his little containment lab where, you know, he was turned into Blanca in the movie. Now, this is actually the earliest line I remember of video game action figures. And this is the first launch of the G.I. Joe Street Fighter II World Warrior brand. This was cool because, again, you know, they were G.I. Joes. They tried to depict the characters as close as possible, but they did come with like all these different weapons like knives and axes and samurai swords. Not things that you would especially see in a game of Street Fighter, right? But this was so cool because they came out with like different vehicles and stuff. Like they came out with the Sonic Boom tank, the Crimson Cruiser, the Beast Blaster. There was a Dragon Fortress, which was Ken Masters and Ryu's headquarters / training center with missile launcher. I mean, these guys were into some weird stuff when they were doing the G.I. Joe deal. But what else was cool about this was the packaging actually came with GamePro tips. I mean, they were really common knowledge stuff, but pretty cool. And actually, if you notice this one has a bit of an error on it. If you look at the packaging is clearly showing Delzim here, but that's not Delzim. That's Vega slash Balrog slash Claw if you're in the tournament play. I thought that maybe like someone glued this back together, but this was just shipped incorrectly. So this is a little bit of a collector's item here. But I do have a variety of these Street Fighter figures, including M. Bison here, or Vega Dictator, depending on how you want to say it. And eventually these lines, they got a little bigger. G.I. Joe started bringing back their original line of, I think they were 12-inch tall figures. And they did so with the Street Fighter brand as well. These I actually found at a flea market. I guess these are pretty collectible now too. But I have Ryu and I also have Guile. But these were full 12-inch figures. You know, they have actual clothing on. That's actual material. They have dog tags. Kind of the same thing though. You've got the sword, you got your machine gun with a rocket launcher and grenades and a stabbing knife. I mean, if you showed people that have never played Street Fighter 2, never knew this line exists, they would laugh their ass off at the aspect that, you know, Ryu has all these weapons. I mean, for a guy like Guile, which makes perfect sense, and I have him as well, he comes with all that stuff, which you can kind of pass that off because he's an army dude. But, yeah, just kind of weird. But I love having these because they are so out of the ordinary and a lot of fun to collect. And like I said, I guess the Street Fighter stuff is getting pretty pricey. So, next up. The next time I would actually see something video game related wouldn't be until the release of Final Fantasy VII. And with the release of Final Fantasy VII meant merchandise. There was a lot of merchandise that was released over in Japan, but more so because this Final Fantasy VII craze was basically taking over North America, and everybody wanted to try Final Fantasy for the first time. Square and Bandai decided to release a bunch of different action figures. And I remember going to a mall in Rockford, Illinois with a friend of mine, and we got in there and we were looking at the store shelves and we looked and we found Final Fantasy VII figures. He picked up Cloud, and unfortunately, even though I wanted to pick up Cloud, he actually picked up Cloud and Sephiroth, now that I think about it. He grabbed both the good ones, leaving me with the rest of the figures. And even though I wasn't a huge fan of her character, I did decide to pick up Aerith Gainsborough. And these Bandai figures, these things are so cool. They're small. One thing I really like about them is that there's no glue on the packaging. You can actually just slide them right out, play with them, and then put them back in the packaging without much of an issue. So cool. They all come with extra stuff. Like Aerith came with like a chocobo. I love these figures. And here's one of the stupidest things I've ever done with an action figure. I think this was like, I don't know, like 7th, 8th grade. I went to a small Christian school, and they were donating toys to a place like Lithuania or something like that for children that just don't have much. And you're supposed to bring in a toy, you're supposed to have your parents buy one, and then you're supposed to drop it in a box. And I was so worried about getting in big trouble, and I was looking around. I just couldn't throw anything in there that I looked to see what looked like it was like unopened. And I put my Final Fantasy VII figure in here. I put my Aerith Gainsborough figure in there. I don't know why I did it. Instantly regretted it as soon as I did it. Eventually, I found her again at a flea market along with Cloud. And in the last couple of years, from all the different conventions and all the different flea markets I've gone to, I've actually been able to complete an entire set of the Final Fantasy VII action figures. And that's cool because they actually sit up here, and I never had like Red 13, for example, of Barrett, but they look so cool. I love these 1990s figure. They are awesome. Next up that I would see would be the sequel to Final Fantasy VII, Final Fantasy VIII, and I actually had this entire line of action figures. I had Squall, I had Zell, I had Renoa and Cypher and Selphie. I had all of those. I love this figure lineup. I'm a big Final Fantasy VIII fan, and I absolutely love these figures. I found Squall not too long ago. I've had Quistis, and I've also had Squall's love interest. I'm really excited about the re-release of Final Fantasy VIII coming out. I love that game. A little bit hard to play on a little hard to play on the original PlayStation, but overall very excited about it. But yeah, found these and collected the entire lineup. And while I was collecting those, I was actually collecting the Tekken 3 action figures. And I had Anna, I had Nina, I still have both of those, but I had like Jin Kazuma, I had Devil Jin, I had True Ogre, I had all of those. A lot of them unfortunately didn't come over when I moved out of my parents' house, but I still have a lot of them actually complete in box. These guys, these are awesome. Todd McFarlane did a bunch of video game action figures back in the day. And he also did, you know, Spawn, all sorts of cool stuff, movie-related stuff, anime-related stuff, really cool studio. They did an entire line of Metal Gear Solid figures, and I remember picking up from the mall, it was this big plastic thing with a bunch of different weapons in it, and it was Solid Snake, and she's here somewhere, Meryl together. It's this really cool 2-pack, but I actually have all of the Metal Gear figures. I don't have them in the packaging, but I do have them loose, and these were just super cool figures. And after that, I think that's about it. Again, I still actively look for these figures from the 1990s. The big ones I'm looking for right now is actually the Final Fantasy VIII one. So I have a bunch of stuff to trade that is non-video game related. So if you're looking for like Star Wars stuff, and you have a bunch of these Final Fantasy VIII action figures, let me know, and we can do a trade. Otherwise, if you see them somewhere, grab them for me, and I'll always pay you back. But yeah, I love 1990s action figures. I hope you enjoyed kind of taking a look through with me and seeing all this different stuff. And until next time, folks, take it easy.